Hello gamers, welcome back, or in case you're new here, I'm NKZL, and this video will serve as an update on what's going on with the first Descendant. In case you're not aware of what the first Descendant is, you can feel free to check my other videos on the topic or one of the many other videos out there. But to give you a very simplified explanation, it is Warframe with a decent amount of emphasis on boss battles. Those of you that have been following the channel know that this is one of the few games that I'm looking forward to the most this year. Last year they had a few very successful tests that showed an amazing amount of promise, and the open beta test was exceptionally well received. The progress they showcased between tests and the way they incorporated feedback have made me and many others very hopeful for this game. That being said, it had its problems, and that is exactly why they held this open beta test to collect feedback and address those problems. Before we talk about anything else, I'm sure at least some people are wondering when they can play this game. So far, all we know is that it will be sometimes in the summer of 2024. Sadly, this can mean anywhere between May to September, but hopefully it will be towards the beginning of summer. With that out of the way, let's talk about the changes they are implementing and what we can expect to be different from the open beta test. The first changes they talk about and what we can expect is various improvements to the story. Regardless if you feel like the story is important or not, statistically speaking, it turns out that the story is extremely important to the success of the vast majority of games. After taking in feedback from the open beta test, they revamped the story, paid more attention to the voice acting, and they even talked about adding immersive cutscenes. The first Descendant is a game where you collect characters, so these characters need to be well fleshed out, and with that in mind they have also talked about introducing storylines for each of these characters. Of course, the story element in any game is highly subjective, and before the game is released, we cannot say if it will be well received or not. At the very least, I think it is a good sign they are acknowledging the feedback and seemingly addressing it. Another element that a lot of people complained about was that the open world zones felt lifeless if a mission was not started or if they did not encounter other people that started missions. The first thing they did when addressing this feedback was explain why it was this way in the open beta test. They explained that there are technical limitations, especially since the game will have crossplay with consoles, and that their main focus is providing top-notch gameplay. However, I think here is where this development team earns my praise. Instead of just leaving it at that and saying there's not much they can do, they actually address this feedback. They forged ahead and split the open world zones into smaller zones and added both combat and non-combat activities. So the world will feel more alive even when players are not participating in a mission. Dividing the active zones can also potentially mean that the game might work on older generation hardware and overall provide a more optimized experience. They have shared a few activities that you will be able to enjoy in the open world zones. One such non-combat activity will be finding encrypted vaults that have been hidden away and playing a minigame to unlock them. Another non-combat activity is the addition of collectible records that will explain the story of the world in a bit more detail. As for the combat side of things, they have shared two such activities. One of them will be void fragments and void reactors. This will involve collecting void fragments, which will require an appropriate damage type to collect, and using these fragments to summon an elite monster. The second activity is called Recon Outpost. This will be outposts of various sizes that we will encounter in the open world, and we will need to simply destroy them and the enemies around them. The developers taking the feedback and implementing these 4 activities is a great start in my opinion. However, I worry that it will not be enough. I would like to see more, and hopefully we will in the future. Off the top of my head, I would very much like to see various types of puzzles, maybe jumping puzzles or some matching puzzles. Doesn't matter what kind of activity they add, they just need to break the monotony of just shooting things. I think they can draw plenty of inspiration from games like Warframe. But again, we need to set our expectations to a realistic level, and I believe what they are doing right now appears to create a great starting point for the game. The next element they talked about was modules, which are basically ways to customize your characters and weapons. After taking a look at the data, they have noticed that most people opted to use certain modes and others got ignored. So they will look into improving this experience and providing various viable options, so everyone can use whatever modules fit their playstyle, basically improving the balance between customization options. One of the last elements that people seem to be worried about was endgame content. Keep in mind we tested a very limited part of the game, but even within that, there were elements that needed to be addressed. First and foremost, they have added a hard difficulty to all content that didn't have it, such as open world zones. These hard modes will be unlocked after completing the normal modes, and it is meant to deliver a truly challenging experience, while also providing better rewards. The first Descendant had 4 types of repeatable activities that can be considered endgame. These were wave defense missions, point defense missions, void battles, and dungeons. The first 3 were fine as they were, but dungeons did not have matchmaking. Not only will dungeons feature hard mode, but they will have matchmaking system and even a system where you can request assistance during content. Alternatively, the game will provide the option to tackle these challenges alone for those that think they can. When talking about endgame content in a live service game, we have to keep in mind that it is a forever moving goalpost, and they understand that. So they will keep an eye on the data, and as soon as people complete the endgame content available, they will release more, and they are already working on developing this content to have it ready for when it is needed. They have not committed to any specific timelines for updates, and for now, I see this as a positive thing. It's the best approach to release content when the players need it, rather than setting a strict timeline and releasing it too early or too late. These were the main talking points, and I think they addressed all the major concerns brought up by the community. It seems this development team keeps doing better and better. I have seen the progress they did between tests, and I already knew they were quite good developers. But I think it's pretty impressive and quite rare to see in gaming, where developers actually take all the major feedback and address it. Especially when we have companies like Amazon that bury their heads in the sand every time they hear feedback they don't like. It's easy to get hyped, and I certainly am. However, I try to set my expectations to a realistic level, and I hope they manage to deliver on everything they talked about. I also hope that we will have an exact release date soon, because I can't wait to sink countless hours into this game. That's it for this video. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. Feel free to let me know what else needed to be addressed, or even if you are just as excited as me to play the first Descendant. Like, subscribe and all that jazz. See you in the next one, gamers.